Okay.
Okay. All afternoon, everyone. I am just going to give you a quick update on the outstanding water bodies plan change. I'll run you through just a, sort of a quick recap of what has been decided in the past and where we are at the moment. So basically in June last year, the RPC agreed to identify outstanding water bodies across the region. This was for all the values at the same time. It was designed with the tangata whenua reps, and essentially the process can be broadly split into the following 5 parts. So the first part was to create an initial list of water bodies for review. Part 2 was just a high-level review of the key values for each of the water bodies. Part 3 confirms the shortlist of candidate outstanding water bodies, and then they go on to a further analysis and consultation. And parts 4 and 5 look to determine a list of outstanding water bodies in Hawke's Bay and then notify a plan change. So moving on, where are we at? In short, the cultural values table has now been completed, and that was done in December last year, and that has been provided to all of the treaty settlement entities. We've deliberately left it in draft form so comments can come back, and those comments are due back at end of this week, actually, on Friday. The review looked at lots of documents, around 70, looked at deeds of settlements, treaty settlement legislation, customary usage reports and Waitangi Tribunal reports. And there was, through that review, we identified around 109 water bodies within the region, and that's around 62 pages long. The cultural values review has been kept quite simple. There's no conclusions contained within the actual table. It's essentially, if the water body was named in the document, it was put into the table and then it was referenced, and regardless of its significance, there was a brief write-up written about it. So you're probably wondering what this looks like. So it looks a bit like this. So there's 4 columns you can see up there. There's the water body name, catchment, relevant treaty settlement entity, and then a summary of the values on an individual document by document basis, and then in the last column is the key values. So it's essentially a quick glance guide, so you can see the water body, you can see the treaty entity, and then you can see which are the main key values for that water body. There's one more table that we discussed at the time, and that's for the other values, and they've been put together and they'll be set out in a similar manner, but I don't have the examples here because that table has to be finished yet. So just some more. Essentially looks like that. And finally onto the next steps. So there's about 3 key next steps. This was actually for the December paper, so it's been pushed forward to now, so you can see December 2017 up there was sort of to complete the high level review of the other values, which is getting there. It's almost completed, but just not quite there yet. And then in February, so once the comments come back from all the treaty entities, we will incorporate their comments into the table, and then come back to the March committee, and we're wondering if we'll do a workshop and talk about how to select a list of candidate outstanding water bodies from the big tables that I've done. And then once we've selected the candidate, or I should say you've selected the candidate outstanding water bodies, then we'll go through to the secondary analysis stage, and then that will carry on to a plan change and a selection of which outstanding water bodies we should have across the region. So that's basically where we're at the moment.
Questions?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the great work that's been done by the staff of Hawke's Bay Regional Council to gather together what is a disconnected group of documents relating to water bodies, and particularly to cultural values in that space. But I also want to acknowledge that from a historical perspective, there's a litany of situations where iwi have challenged some of those values that have been put together, because of what is an inefficient or perhaps inadequate engagement by other LTAs in working with Māori. I also want to acknowledge that, yes, we have received those documents and they've been circulated around our PSGEs, but it has highlighted again for us the need to have a better alignment between council processes and iwi organisations. For example, pertaining to the feedback required to this matter, Tātou, for example, doesn't even meet for another 2 weeks to discuss this at length. It also assumes that our tangata whenua reps have a pool of resources at their disposal to be able to gather the necessary science from across the region that just isn't there. Once these documents land on our table, it's incumbent upon us as representatives to source and resource the acquisition of that information in our regions. So while I acknowledge the great work that's been done by our staff, I just want to reiterate that timing in this sense is again being brought forward because I would like to see particularly Hawke's Bay Regional Council be more reflective of the limitations around our iwi partners in this forum. We're motivated to participate, we're motivated and we are collecting the information that's been asked of us. I'm just taking this opportunity to highlight that the deadline that's been outlined in today's presentation is unrealistic with regards to iwi groups being able to meet that. So that may have ongoing implications, and I'm just looking for, one, to note those, and to point out that there will be some delay in some of that feedback coming back. And how does that impact?
It is, to get to the list of candidate outstanding water bodies, we need the feedback from the treaty entities. In terms of dates, in terms of the slippage on the dates, probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks max by the end of the month. It would be great to have all the treaty settlement comments back. I don't know, is that doable? Well,
That's not an answer I can answer on behalf of all the tangata whenua reps, but I do know that Tātou in our region will be addressing, as well as Mangaharuru Tangatu.
Yes.
Yep. Are there any other reps that will have any challenges around meeting the deadline for the end of this month?
Heniuru as well.
Yeah. So at this stage, the indicator is that we'll be able to meet the end of the month.
For Ruapani, we hope that we can update this document later on as well as up until March, because it won't be till negotiation and pre-settlement that any research will be done and put together. So is there a chance in the future to update?
Well, that's a good point to talk about too. It will be set in time for the next stage of this plan change, but we're treating it as a living document, and we're hoping it will go forth for lots of different plan changes, and then continually getting new information in to update it.
Kia ora, and just want to reiterate the comments from Api about the value of what you're doing and have been doing, because I don't think we have a resource like this within council. So even though there was a lot of resource going into collecting all this information, this will be a valuable resource going forward beyond outstanding freshwater bodies. So I do commend the council for doing that and looking at doing that. MTT's in the same position as some of the other groups, with not having staff available to be able to go through all the material. Just want to put it out there, I don't know how we deal with it, but other than resourcing in the future, is that the information is imperfect, because what we're drawing on is published sources or sources that are readily available, and that assumes that that's the sum total, or very close to the sum total of those, the kōrero relating to water bodies, which of course it's not, because iwi are doing other things than sitting around writing about their water bodies. So we may just need to be cognizant of that and think about, hopefully we'll get comment back from iwi, but think about what do we do in the situation where we don't get a good response from iwi about gaps in the information we've provided to them. We cannot expect them to fill them. As I say, they're not resourced to do that, and as Api's pointed out, that's one of the main problems some of us are having in trying to get people to look at it. So it's a gap we need to note, and think about. and then take it in our stride. We have to move forward, but I think going forward, as Api has said, we do need to think about how we resource iwi to engage, to help us as council identify those sorts of things when that information's not readily available. Yeah, thank you.
I have one. So it's 109 significant. Of course, everyone thinks their stream or their river is significant, including me, and it's a polluted stream drain out of Hastings. But outstanding's quite a different matter, isn't it? I mean, outstanding is something which humanity hasn't destroyed yet. So it's really interesting, and I take on board because what Tani and Api have said, because each iwi has to understand, or hapa has to understand what is significant, and probably everything is. Everything's significant, but very little is going to be outstanding at the moment until we make it outstanding.
So just a question, is there a number we can't go to?
Standing.
Well, we are looking in terms of, if we're talking about working under the NPS regulations here, and we're really looking at a small number across the region to the top of the top.
Top of the
Yes,
top.
I mean there's lots of significant and high value waterways in Hawke's Bay, but we're just going that extra level, the best
Yeah.
of the best, with the added protection measures.
Yeah, that would be my view. Is that the view of the committee? That's what's going to happen? No other choice. Thank you very much, Belinda. Do we have someone to move that we receive and note this report? Thank you, Tania. Seconder, Tom, will you second to receive the report? Peter Bevan jumped in. Do no one wish to speak anymore? All those in favour? Aye, it's carried. We'll move to the next item, which is item 10. Oh, Belinda's gone. Thank you on that. Item 10. Mr. Ide again, is it? Supported by Tom.
So, as you're all aware, this type of item is a regular feature on every second agenda of the committee. This is an update on our existing resource management policy work programs, bits and pieces. Rather than going through blow by blow, just a couple of things to draw out for your attention, I suppose. You've already heard about oil and gas regulation, the outstanding water bodies. On the bottom of, or near the bottom of, page 25 on my paper, there's mention here of the Taharoa Mohaka plane change. So, as planning staff, planning work program managers, we're well aware that the Mohaka plane change initiative has been kind of the poor cousin to Tank. Tank certainly remains our number one priority, but for 2018, Tom, James and myself certainly intend that Mohaka gets brought back into the light, and talking about redesigning what Mohaka plan change and the work program around that might look like in the early parts of 2018. We'd like to, if I can express the view, we'd like to canvass the thoughts of some of the tangata whenua reps and even maybe some of the councillors with interests in that particular catchment about how we might go about that redesign effort. Not about what the plan change content would look like, but how we might go about redesigning the work program to tackle and complete a plan change for the Mohaka catchment. So that's something that we gents will turn our minds to in the not too distant future. And just the other one that I'd like to bring to your attention is two of them actually. We're still waiting on the Environment Court's decision regarding Plan Change 5 appeal. We're waiting. We continue to wait. And the last one I'd like to give particular mention to is the Regional Resource Management Plan Effectiveness Reporting. I'm meeting with the consultant who's been working on that later this week, and so I'd like to just touch base with him in particular around his next steps and whether it is, if it's doable for him to finalise his report in order for that final report to come back to this committee on the 21st of March. Bearing in mind that agendas and papers and the like need to be prepared and pre-circulated a week out from that, that does not give our consultant too much breathing space between now and then in reality. So if it's not the 21st of March meeting in which that plan effectiveness report comes back to you, it will then be the 2nd of May meeting. There is no scheduled planning committee meeting during April, now that we've shifted to a 6-weekly cycle. That's
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gavin. It's nice to see that Te Haurua Mohawk is still there and has come up again. I'd be keen to. I'm interested in knowing what's going on up there, so I'd be keen to be on that group for you. The other one is, are we going to at some stage? I take it then we'll be adding the Wairoa catchment in there as well, at some in that program. As these things go through in the.
as James sort of says, after tank, the long-term plan, the current long-term plan, not the draft one the council's working on at the moment, but that does signal commencing our plan change works for the rest of the region in 2020-21 financial year in terms of community engagement, policy options. But that's, as you know, there are on-the-ground initiatives happening in that catchment as we speak already.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Gavin, the NPS on urban development capacity, has HPUD's committee met at all to consider that?
The Joint Council Working Group, HPUD's working group, has not met since the revised strategy was adopted. It's probably largely due to the technical advisory group members, including myself, still figuring out what this new national policy statement for urban development capacity really means for Napier and Hastings. MFE have invited senior practitioners down to a workshop next week to have a further discussion around the implications of this new national policy statement, and on Friday myself and my fellow HPUD's technical advisory group members are having a discussion about breathing life back into HPUD's and that working group. So watch this space. It's likely that the HPUD's working group will indeed be working in the months ahead, but the finer details of that to be worked through.
Well, I'm not on it now, but I'd certainly be interested to know the implications and how it's going to be progressed and when.
Any more questions? Gavin, if not, I have one. I should know the answer to this, but because I have attended a couple of tank meetings, but tank is very focused on water at the moment, but of course it's and rightly so, but it's not its prime objectives. And perhaps Tom could not just answer but attend to this, because I would like, as a chair, a very clear statement from Tank that we do not want any raw sewage dumped in the Ahuriri estuary or the Karamu stream. Can we get that? Implicit. No arguments.
So that question put to the Tank Group, I'm sure, would probably get an answer that they would like to see policy in that direction,
Okay.
And that was within their ambit.
It is with their ambit, I know, I'm not sure. Well, can you put it to them that,
So
I'm not sure all of us would agree on it. Do we agree on that? Sorry? Well, Tank only deals with, well, everywhere we don't want it, but let's start, we've got a plan change coming up referring to tank, and let's make sure that our two cities are very clear that we do not want raw sewage, and they have to go and fix their infrastructure, because it's not good enough for one of us or both of them to say, oh, they only do it when they're when we get a lot of rain. Well, as Councillor Barker said at the last meeting, perhaps the sewage should end up in the streets of Taradale, and then that'll get some reaction.
That's very inflammatory.
That's why I said you said it. We do need clear statement on this, otherwise it just gets airy-fairy, and we do not want raw sewage for any reason turning up in our estuary or our streams.
Yep, so there's a stormwater working group that has been looking at these issues, and the TLAs are well represented there. And my understanding from the agenda is that this urban water policy is going to be a big focus of the tank meeting on the 22nd of February.
Okay. If you could convey our views, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Just adding to that, if I may, with climate change and the expected increased frequency of sudden storms, and the level at which things are going to flood increasing, I'd hope the stormwater overrun, or whatever you call it, will factor in the fact that this is going to happen more often, and we still don't want sewage ending up in our waterways.
Understand, and probably worthwhile noting, and you'll see this in due course, and Councillor Belfer can speak to this if he wants, but the tank group has specifically identified climate change as being an objective that needs to be considered and accounted for within the plan.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you have to speak to that, Tom.
Just comment that in response to Councillor Barker's inflammatory statement the last time we were together on this issue, I noted that in Hawke's Bay today, the senior manager at Napier Council responsible for such matters said that, yeah, well, that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, if the poop is going to show up in the estuary or the streets, we're going to put it in the estuary.
Is that what he said? Well, it's said it with a sense of humour, but what we do want is what Tania says. We want to ensure our councils programming works on their stormwater systems and their sewage systems to account for all circumstances.
10 years from now.
10 years from now, 20 years from now.
On that matter, Mr. Chair. On that matter, we're meant to be a strategic committee, and if we're going to have global warming, then lots of Napier will be under the water, and the sewage from all those houses will be entering into our waterways. So there may need to be some ethical questions thrown at the Napier City Council about them allowing new houses to be built in areas that are highly likely to be flooded.
We won't ask Councillor Bevan to comment on that, otherwise he will make an inflammatory statement as well. We'll be getting into trouble. Okay, do we have someone to move to receive this report, please? And thank you, Gavin. Councillor Dick, Councillor Balfour, all those in favour? Aye. Thanks, Gavin. You get the hard end of the stick twice today, mate. And more. You're on number 11.
Just keeps on. Yes, item number 11, statutory advocacy update. Again, regular feature of committee meeting papers. Again, similar fashion to what I did earlier. Just want to bring your attention to a couple of these things rather than go through item by item. So on page 29 of the agenda bundle, there's mention made of a notified resource consent for a retirement village along the, you might recall it, driving up past the expressway, there's a turf park or grass pasture park there. Part of that's proposed to go into a retirement village complex by Bupa. The current situation column there does say that staff were reviewing the application to consider if a submission was necessary. Time's moved on since this agenda was published, and on Friday a submission was lodged on behalf of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. that in that submission it traversed a number of issues, but needs to say it covered the issue of HPUDs, Heritonga Plains Urban Development Settlement Pattern, how the development might deal with stormwater collection, treatment and disposal, and the other meaty item was around natural hazards in and around that site. And the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Manager Ian MacDonald in particular raised questions around what sort of planning has or should be done for vulnerable and largely immobile people in the face of tsunami. And so that raises some interesting questions, and questions that are certainly not unique to just this Bupa resource consent application. There'll be more to come on that.
A question on that, Chair? It's just a... so what you're suggesting is that those particular topics weren't covered well enough in the submission made by the applicant, and that's why we've raised queries about them?
The applicant's assessment of environmental effects with their resource consent application was, could have done better, we thought.
Okay, that's just,
and we're trying to fill those gaps.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you, Gavin. Just a couple of questions in regard to the Plan Change 11 from Napier City Council.
You're jumping to there, okay.
And I see we've got till what's the date today? 2 days to make an application, and I'm certain we'll be making the most vigorous application we've ever made on this consent application. But I just want to ask, in the last line of the second, at the activity column, you've got increasing the number, reducing the overall number of sports fields, increasing the number of artificial turfs, establishment of HBRC high performance training facility. That was a sneaky little input in there, wasn't it? And then the enlargement of the residential area. Obviously the artificial turfs are going to generate a significant amount of stormwater, but what is the expectations around the residential? How many houses are we talking? Do you know? Is it in the application?
I think it was in the rezoning material. Exact numbers escape me, but it was sort of marginally another couple of hundred, just with the reconfiguration of the rezoning area, and so it wasn't an astronomical extra amount of housing going in there.
Yeah, there's a couple of hundred. It's quite astronomical in my book. And the stormwater arrangements as a consequence of this, what are they? What's proposed?
So this plan change has been notified. During Napier City Council's drafting of this, their project people came and spoke with our experts on the stormwater front, so Craig Goodyear and co provided feedback, and it's our understanding that none of the residential catchment area of this development would flow into the Taipo stream. It all heads back to Saltwater Creek. Yeah, and around into the detention pond there.
So we're just going to continue to dump it into the estuary via Saltwater Creek.
So with a rezoning proposal like this, they have come up with a high-level, broad conceptual plan or structure plan. It's not at a detailed design level drawing kind of stage yet. That will follow in due course. So Napier City Council's engineers haven't got out their set squares and whatever else to draw specific plans.
Finally then, what submission were you planning on making to this?
Prompted by your opening comment, the indication from staff so far is that we thought the rezoning in its current form now, for what it is a heck of a lot better than it was when we initially saw it in its draft fashion. So a submission about 30 minutes ago was probably unlikely. But I'll retest. Yeah. But I'll retest the team's view and just reassure ourselves if a submission really is necessary or not.
Can we give you a steer on this, perhaps even a resolution? I've got that in my head. I believe we ought to vigorously oppose any increase in residential plan changing in that zone, because the impacts already are unmitigated from something like 1,100 houses. Here we're looking at something like a 20% increase in residential facilities, plus the increased burden of artificial turfs, and the stormwater impacts there will be extraordinary in the face of the council's inaction on managing its stormwater. Now, if we're able to see a very significant plan and proposal for handling stormwater in that zone, we've got major impacts on our most sensitive Aharu estuary environment. I just don't believe the system can tolerate an increase of that dimension in terms of increased stormwater impacts. And I'm not sure what research your staff have done to consider the effects of increased stormwater in the zone. I'd be interested to know that. But in any event, we know the system's overloaded. We ought to be opposing any increase just simply on a stormwater basis, let alone inundation, climate change, getting people out of houses in the event of submersion in that area. It's below sea level.
Well, it's sort of related to the same topic. Do you want to get a response from Gavin first?
So, just speaking with regards into support of Councillor Curtin's statements, I do. So this is coming from my role as ward councillor in this space. And I'll make Napier City Council engineers aware of the feedback as well. But in talking with the residents along Clarence Cox, where the current residential zone meets the industrial residence, where they're planning to build the space, the feedback I've received from the residents is that there's still ongoing problems around surface water in that area. There have been some hard structures put in place to help mitigate those processes, but currently surface water still flows from that area directly into the residential area, minus that which has been channeled away by hard infrastructure which has been put in place. So whether or not that leans towards Councillor Curtin's concerns, and I'm just bringing it up to make sure that we here at the council, or that our staff here are aware, and I'll in turn relay that across the street. Did that make any sense?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Just supporting what Councillor Curtin's saying, it concerns me that you said that the application had improved from when it was initially discussed or whatever. It was a lot better than what it was, but it didn't sound to me like you were confident that was the best that it could possibly be, or that it was the best solution that we could possibly have. That, we've at some point we've got to draw a line in the sand, and I think we're getting to the point where this is it. If as Councillor Curtin, we've got to do something with the stormwater. Just putting back into Sandy Creek and then back into the estuary is not the solution we're looking for, because that's only going to make our role and our task more difficult than what it needs to be, and not to mention what it's doing to the estuary itself. Yeah, I would support a submission being made of some.
Into the sand are the sort of things, they're really important things. They did that at the Alamo, lying in the sand with a sword. And I tend to agree, eventually, as a council or as a group, the Regional Planning Committee, have got to draw a line in the sand on some of these issues. But I kind of like, James, are you listening to this? Because this would have the Spanish charging at us. This is a line in the sand if Gavin takes a very proactive position here.
Mr. Chairman, we've got to be careful about telling staff what to do on matters that are delegated to them.
No, it's a matter of principle and policy. Neil's raised a matter. Can you concentrate down there, you guys? Especially while I'm talking about you, Neil. Neil has raised a very fundamental point, which is in our sphere of duty. And I just want James to comment on it because it will.
There's no paper to that effect, Mr. Chairman.
He wants to move a motion. He said he would like. I'd like James to comment on it.
Chair, I have a slight, more than a slight. I've got concerns about policy made on the hoof. Effectively, we've got formal processes with respect to the Resource Management Act, the Regional Resource Management Plan, the Regional Coastal Environment Plan. And they are the mechanisms by which this council formally determines its position on these matters, and it puts those into a statutory framework that has the full force of law, that enables us to undertake our compliance and enforcement and consenting activity. We have an existing regional resource management plan, which I'm sure that the Napier City Council will be working to and working under. Unfortunately, we're still in a tank plan change process, and that plan change process will be bringing forward further controls on land use, stormwater, to, and amongst other things, protect the Ahariri estuary. At this point in time today, that process is still running, and I appreciate the fact that there is a direction of travel with respect to public sentiment, and there is a direction of travel with respect to the views at this table. But until we go through the process of formally receiving the recommendations from the tank group, and then we go through the formal statutory processes around notifying those views and proposals, and in turn putting them into the Regional Resource Management Plan, we're not working through due process in terms of our position. Now, I think it's perfectly reasonable for councillors to want to ensure, and this committee in its entirety to want to ensure, that this proposed plan change from the Napier City Council is consistent with the regional policy statement, is consistent with the Regional Resource Management Plan, is consistent with the Regional Coastal Environment Plan, and I think to that effect we need to be assured that staff have considered this proposal against those existing documents, and it is consistent with that. Anything over and above that, which is an ad hoc position that's put forward today, I think is working outside of the statutory process for which we have significant responsibility.
Can I just get Neil to respond to that, and I'll come back to you.
Well, I'm totally flabbergasted by it, really. I mean, here's an opportunity to make a submission. I thought that was process. Here's the opportunity for us to say there are elements of this plan change that we are very concerned about, and unless you can demonstrate that they do meet our objectives under the RMP, we vehemently oppose them. Now, I'm struggling to know what I've missed in that in terms of process.
No, look, I think we're probably agreeing with each other. It's just a case of, I mean, of course, if what they are proposing is not consistent with the Regional Resource Management Plan, then we would oppose it. I guess if it's consistent with that, what I'm concerned about is that we're making up a position, if you like. So the policy positions of this council with respect to water quality in the Ahariri estuary are determined through the Regional Resource Management Plan and the appropriate statutory process to arrive at those policy positions. They're not something that can be made up by a simple vote of this committee. So that's the test that we have to hold Napier City to, and that's what the Environment Court will hold them to. And I think you're quite right to seek an assurance from staff that it is consistent with those, and if it's not consistent, then we should oppose it. And yes, it is the onus is on the applicant to demonstrate that they are consistent with the existing planning rules.
Well, could I just follow up? I don't need to take all the time, Mr. Chair, but can we have a statement or assurance from staff that the stormwater discharges into the estuary are, one, compliant and producing the outcomes that are required under our Regional Resource Management Plan? I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that we've got a whole spreadsheet, a whole page of a spreadsheet with all the consents which show non-compliance. So there's that aspect of it, but also, are we achieving the outcomes for the estuary that we are required of the RRMP? Have you got any issues with regard to this proposed plan change in regard to our RRMP? Are there any
I think
issues?
we'll leave it at that, because I think you take that on board. Peter, now, and then Tom, to you.
On a slightly different note, the same activity column there. Establishment of an HBRC high performance training facility. Councillor Wilson's wondering if that's for councillors or for staff.
No, that's a typo. Sorry, apologies for that. It's Rugby Union, RU, not RC.
Going to bring my trainers next meeting, Chair, but there you go.
Tom.
Yeah, I want to go back to Neil's point. Sorry. And you, Mr. Chairman, have been an advocate and have taken admirable leadership, for example, with the Karamoo Stream in suggesting that there are parallel courses to be employed. There's a plan change process that drifts along on its own laborious timetable, and there's an action plan that can operate at a faster political pace if there's political will for it to happen. And in this case, we've been communicating with the Napier City Council via video. These are public discussions we've been having. Some of us, I think, deliberately have been trying to send signals through the airwaves as to where the sentiment of this council is, and hopefully this committee is, on the issue of what's happening to the Ahuriri estuary. And Councillor Curtin's comments that add 200 houses to a situation that is already out of control, where the senior manager is saying, sorry about that, we're just going to have to keep doing it, is not acceptable. And I thought there was a proposition put forward a couple of meetings ago, because this issue has been discussed probably at every meeting I've been at in the last 6 council meetings and committee meetings of councils, that we elevate this to a political discussion between, I'm now speaking as a councillor, between the regional councillors, or some regional councillors, and our counterparts at the Napier City Council, the mayor and whatever councillors hold this portfolio, to make sure that if they're not watching the video, they can see the body language firsthand as to how we feel about this.
Chair, could I just respond that they are watching the video, because I've had correspondence following recent appearances on our Facebook site by way of video. I'm meeting with the Chief Executive of the Napier City Council on Friday to discuss precisely this issue, and particularly in terms of how do we manage the tank plan change and the long-term plans and our interaction between our councils. And I'm meeting with the Chief Executive of the Hastings District Council at the same time. So the three of us are getting together to discuss precisely that, including a proposition that there be some workshop presentations to respective councillors across, and an exchange of proposals, if you like, contained within the long-term plan, and how they all feed into tank. There's no problem at all with this council expressing support or opposition to anything that might be proposed in the region. The point I'm making, however, is that this is a statutory planning process. The commissioners, in this case, the Napier City Council, the commissioners and the Environment Court, will all be taking due regard to the necessary legal instruments, and that will be on which that will be the test on which this application stands or falls, not the sentiments of councillors around this table on any given day. And that's just the bald reality of the fact that it's those legal instruments that have the weight, and it's within the gift of this committee to amend those. And we're in the process of doing that with the tank plan change. I just guess I would note that in the intervening period, we are in a reasonably frustrating position of having the existing plan, which dates back to 2006, still being operative. So some of what you are seeking to achieve may be difficult to achieve until the tank plan change itself becomes operative.
You're the planning expert, not me, but I do seem to recall that despite what regional and city and district plans might say, that councils and decision makers still must comply with Part 2, regardless whether it's in the plan or not. So in support of what Councillor Curtin is saying and others, is there a way to investigate whether we can see that this proposed plan change would not uphold the values or the priorities under Part 2, regardless of what the plans say? Because given we can see what's coming, obviously there is a groundswell change of opinion about what's acceptable, and perhaps we need to look at another way of making the argument. If it's not through, well, comply with the regional plan, and you can tick that box, but if there's a higher threshold that is appropriate for Part 2, then can we not make that argument?
We absolutely can, and my expectation is the very first thing that their application does is it demonstrates how it does meet Part 2, including the requirement to avoid, remedy and mitigate. Unfortunately, there are parts of Part 2, such as terms like life supporting capacity of water bodies, which are subjectively defined, and in the absence of clear planning standards through the Regional Resource Management Plan, it's quite hard to hold people to account for particular performance on those tests. But that's certainly something we can look at, I think, in terms of Part 2, whether we're satisfied it is all compliant. Yep, absolutely.
Can I just ask one question in regard to the current operative plan and the discharge of sewage from these proposed 200 odd houses? Will there be sufficient capacity in the current sewage network, given the overflow situations we have, and given we can't even find the outfall? Is there capacity in the current operative plan to say that in fact such a plan change would render non-compliance with the necessary consents required for that sewage discharge from those 200 odd houses?
Off the top of my head, I'd say we'd have to go away and look at the existing consent, the extent to which the existing consents for the Napier City sewage system enables growth, or whether there is new consents required here, and if the new consents are required, could they be essentially authorised under the existing RRMP? So that's something we'd need to go and look at. Again, I would assume that's something that the Napier City Council has well and truly thought through before they've got to this point, but we'll need to go and double check that and then provide you with some advice.
Along a similar line, this council has chosen not to take enforcement action against other councils and take them to court, as long as they're attempting to do their best with what they made. It would seem to me that if we've got a problem with the sewage scheme currently, and the council is going to add 200 extra connections to it, then they're exacerbating the problem. In a situation where a council exacerbates the current problem, would we continue with the same, I'd say, benevolent attitude?
Well, that's another matter that we do need to look at. It may well be that where it's going into the network, it's not part of the constraints that have given rise to some issues in recent times, or it may not. That's something we'd need to get to the bottom of.
And I think if we're not going to take a benevolent, hands-off approach to it, in the situation where it's being exacerbated, we should make that plump and plain to the council and the developers.
That's actually right. Yeah, totally.
Just to add to the red flags, I suppose, like Christchurch, they've gone through the earthquake and liquefaction dramas and all the rest of it, but most of Napier is liquefaction, so like I had a house down Nelson Crescent. You only need to dig down that deep and it's wet. So, putting new houses in those areas next to the estuary, where we have over 200 or so shakes a year here in Napier, so of varying seismic movement. I think that Yeah, I think we're not really being responsible.
I think we've got the signals, and one of the things that I think that this council and this committee are really keen to send to people is get your house in order. And sure, we've got to give people time to get their house in order, but we don't want to exacerbate existing problems without us having a plan to get the house in order. And I think that's the concern around the table, Gavin, and James and Tom. If we can send a signal to people, this is going to require significant capital expense, and they need to get on with it because we won't be benevolent forever. So, do we have someone who will move to receive the statutory advocacy report, which generated quite a lot of discussion? Have a mover? A seconder? All those in favour? Right.
One abstain, Mr. Chair.
Did you? Oh,
One abstain.
due to your.
Due to my conflict of interest.
Okay, we're going to. Minor items not on the agenda. We'll take one of mine first. I just wanted to report on Waitangi Day. I attended the hikoi from Waitangi Park to Clive. This year was particularly good. I didn't manage to get to the regional sports park, but I'm told 15,000 people turned up. So that was probably the second biggest Waitangi celebration in the country, I would have thought. It usually is. And very successful event in Wairau, I'm told.
Very successful. Looking forward to next year's and wish to acknowledge the contribution that HBRC made towards the day.
Oh, goodness. We gave some money, did we?
Yes.
All the at the celebration at Clive, all the regional leaders turned up from Heratonga, and great speeches were made, and so it was a very good day, all in all. I also want to report that I attended a wānanga at Pakipak 2 weeks ago, which was based around water in Heratonga in particular, and around the Karamu in particular. But it was also about some other culture issues, and we took a bus trip up top of Tamata Peak, which was very timely, and it was just a hugely successful day, and I'm just sad that it was in the weekend and other councillors weren't able to attend because it was a really good day, and a lot of really good information, and everyone got to understand each other's point of view. Just want to talk about Kahutia. As you know, you read in the papers, we have a common vision with Nikki on this. Whilst we have a common vision, there's separate investment models that we are developing and Kahutia means to cloak our land in trees, and we have managed to get very high profile on this quite quickly nationally. We have strong support for a major tree planting program from government, and we're probably the front runner in that endeavour, I would have thought. There's all sorts of wonderful spin-offs that are coming out of this, and Councillor Barker and Nahiwi Timona have both visited the prison to talk to them about developing a big nursery program out there. And of course, and that's getting very strong support from the Minister of Prisons and from the prison community, because this is going to be a project which is going to go on for 30 years, and people can develop all sorts of wonderful skills around the production of nursery plants and of planting. So this is an endeavour that there are some quite a lot of lead-in time, because there are all the trees, and they're only in the 20 million odd for the next 2 years, have been sold. So unless we grow our own trees, we will not be successful. So opportunity for maraes, and of course there are 2 maraes, and Ngā Whenua Rahuri is right in here with some expertise. So we want to mobilise them as well. The objective is to plant up our hill country that is eroding at a huge rate, and it is much worse than any of us can imagine. And of course the silting is has a huge effect on our streams and rivers, and then our estuaries and coastline. So there's a group of us who think that our core challenge in our region is plant more trees, and we certainly intend to do that. We think there will be a significant effect on the GDP, so this is commercial, and that's why I mentioned to you about Tane Randall's view on carbon credits, because we'll have 2 investment models. One will be a community investment model, which will be driven by us, and the other one will be a commercial model where we'll be looking for a return on our investment, and we're looking at between 5 and 7%. The model is based around 50% native, 25% other introduced species, and 25% pine. So it's quite a unique model, different from the forestry boys, different from the government, but we are going to paddle our own walker on this issue. And I really do hope that all of our treaty groups get in behind this endeavour, and happy to have a discussion about it any time. But right now, RPC terms of reference. Who was talking about that, Ty?
Well, yeah, kia ora no. It's been 6 to 8 months since the terms of reference were sent to the regional council from the Tangata Whenua group, and we see it as a priority item that needs to be dealt with. So I'd like to see that on the priority items on the agenda at the next RPC meeting. Also, there is a chance now for councillors to raise any issues with those terms of reference. It is the day after the Treaty of Waitangi celebrations and all that, and we are not here as a result of anyone's goodwill. We are here as a result of statutory responsibilities, and we would like to see partnership progressed. Kia ora.
Normally have a discussion on it. You just put your view, just like I did put my view.
But you elaborate on it.
Well, you want to elaborate more? I don't think we will, otherwise we have a big discussion tonight. So minor items are minor items. That's not minor. Benton.
Kia ora tātou. Just very quickly bring the committee up to speed on the River Road at Newhaka. Has been a source of antagonism for Ril Meihana for years, and unfortunately poor old Ril's passed away just as we were getting to the pointy end of the discussion. But Graham Symes has stepped into the breach, and I'm here to sort of advocate for that community out there to do something about fixing the road. I guess the progress in the last week, and I really huge thank you to Graham Hansen and Steve Cave and the team for the work they've done. We've got a plan, an initial plan in front of the District Council already, like a week later, just waiting to negotiate our way through a couple of points there. We have an ambition to shift the riverbed back into its natural, where it used to be, basically, and use some of that material to halt the flow of the slip. Peter Manson, also big thanks to him, he's got a planting plan there and actually the first tranche of money to plant it, so 400 odd acres of moving hill. So it's been oh crikey, ever since this council's been going, that's been an issue. We're hoping to do something about it in the next 5 years, starting with some remedial works immediately. District Council seems to be on board and pretty happy with progress, so just an update.
Thank you, Fenton. Yeah, James and I visited the site. It's quite amazing, really. Tank, who was talking about? Oh, Tanya.
Oh, nothing major here, just a report, I guess, that the tangata whenua reps met today, and one of the items on our agenda was the tank proposed plan change that we'll be seeing coming through, and just wanting to signal that we'd like our advisors to be working closely with staff to make sure that as that gets presented, that does so smoothly to avoid all issues, and so wanting to try and be in at the front end of seeing that through and helping that through. So just wanted to make that comment and reiterate that we would like our advisors to be part and parcel of that.
Cheers. Sorry, just can I just make a comment on the water conservation order?
Oh yeah, no, you did. Yeah, that's no, but it's public excluded.
I just want to make a comment before you go into public
okay.
excluded.
Yeah.
And we are providing, and we have provided in the statutory advocacy update an update on the water conservation order. The reason we've left a segment there for public excluded is kind of an abundance of caution. There was an instance a few meetings ago where a general discussion around the water conservation order ended up getting ending up as someone's view of evidence of a change in council policy at the hearing, and so there's no rabbits in the hat in terms of the water conservation order update. But if the committee's wanting to have a deeper dive into some of the issues, it will be worthwhile going to public excluded. But otherwise, it's not necessary. The update is provided in the statutory advocacy update.
Okay, I will. You recommend we don't have to have further discussion beyond that.
It just depends on your questions. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering, was that anything meaningful?
No. It's something that was left by somebody who shouldn't have.
I've just got another matter, and then I'll come to you, Paul. Another minor item.
Another minor item, Mr. Chair. We're just looking from the tangata whenua's representatives seeking to clarify when and how the co-chair will be participating in the formation of agenda, because we've noticed that there are a couple of items that keep slipping off, and there are some things that we're continually bringing back to the table to seek some progress on. While I acknowledge and appreciate the workload that our staff are currently under, this is more around process than anything else. So I'm just seeking some clarity to express the concern from the reps around when and how is the co-chair going to be participating with regards the chairs. Thank you. Around the formation of the agenda.
Well, look, as I understand it, Leanne has diaried for the rest of the year a pre-meet. Yep, you're going to. Sorry. Yes. So yes.
So that.
Yeah. So what you? I just wanted clarification from Tom. That's all. Okay. So what? Sorry.
No. Do we go into special? Do we go into
public excluded?
Because it's only if there's any questions we want to have a discussion about. Because otherwise, your water conservation order update's the one that's in the agenda.
Yeah, I can speak to that if you want me to.
Yeah. No. But I'd just like to pass on to Tom. I appreciate his concerns, given if someone had used what was discussed around this table as a in front of the hearing panel.
Part-I Chair from our Whāko Trust. I was notified there might be a proposed meeting coming up between the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and applicants. Is there an update on that? That was from our Whāko Trust, from invitation from Renata Apatu to hold it at Ngāmatia Station. Is there an update
I'll
on
answer that. Yeah, we are. I've spoken to Ren, and Mr McGregor is coming to see. And it is our intention to go up there. Somebody said, well, an hour and a half there, an hour there, and can't see we can get around Ngāmatia in an hour. But we're definitely going up there. Is anyone who wants to come along, Mr Bailey? We can take 2 cars. But we're definitely going, and I'm meeting Peter tomorrow to discuss details of that.
So just worthwhile noting, we've been invited. We're not calling the meeting. So
No, they want us to come up and have a chat. And we're really keen to do that. Okay, if there are no other issues, we'll call this meeting to a halt. Thank you very much.